Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing okay. So interesting times. The title of this talk, "The End of the Robot," it's not really suggestive that the robots are done and we're not going to see robots anymore. It's more about this thing highlighted in orange, rethinking cognition, emotion, and form. Um, the reason is, to me, is that we have a conventional way of thinking about what a robot is and what it means to create a robot. And in my particular context, I want to look at by rethinking cognition, emotion, and form, um, we can go beyond the robot. And if we go beyond that, what is it that we're looking at? And that forms the content of today's presentation. Um, but before I get started, I'd first like to thank Javi for introducing me to this platform, and Damien and Sophie, who I got to know just now and some time ago. They're amazing hosts. Thank you for that. And I'm quite grateful to you guys for being present here and listening to me. Um, so, with that said, just to give you a little bit of context, what you see here is a robot that was built by my friend and business partner, Kyle Hirani. Maybe some of you know him or might have worked with him in the past. Um, he's he was a classmate of mine when I was at university. So after graduating in 2016, um, the two of us decided to start this company, Vāsthu. And at the time, we weren't quite really sure what we were going to sell. All we knew was, you know what, we've done robotics, we want to make something cool, and we're just going to go about doing that. So the first thing that we started looking at was drones, armed drones, some of them for reconnaissance and so on, uh, specifically for the use case of police and internal security in India. My dad's a police officer, and so he used to tell me stories of how he used to go patrolling or sweeping forests, trying to get rid of the internal militia. And he would say that communications is a big issue. Um, it is unfortunate that internal militia is the largest cause of the number of police who die in India, even more than terrorists kill per year. They kill almost on a daily basis. So it gave me some kind of a motivation to work towards that. But because I was in the UK and a fresh graduate, it wasn't really sure if it's going to be successful, but it wasn't successful. So I had to go back home. So when I was home, I was thinking about ideas to pursue, which is when I remembered about this robot. So Kyle calls it Pixar. He was inspired by Disney's Pixar. And this is a really beautiful snapshot that you're looking at here from the front. And I've left it intentionally dark in the background with just the face of it shown here, just to let you imagine. His intention was to create or investigate or explore the idea of a companion robot. Obviously, this is not a new thing. A lot of people before him have done that. I mean, lots of companies. We all know about the various companion robots like Asimo and so on, but we'll get to that. But I want you to hold the thought or the image when I say of a companion robot. I just want you to hold the image that you get. That's going to be important for the latter parts. Um, so his intention was he wanted to create something that he could interact with using commands. So he would say something or do something, and the Pixar would then reply back to him by changing its colors or probably showing some gestures and so on. So I figured, oh, you know what? All it takes is just adding a bunch of sensors, adding a few features here and there, and we could commercialize it and sell it. So I started looking at what the market was doing, what the competition was doing. But what I found was the way that the market looked at the idea of a companion robot was absolutely had nothing to do with the word companion at all. In my words, what I would say is I would call them Alexa on wheels. Now, while we were looking at this, we were trying to figure out the most important part of our own venture, which is what is the problem that this companion that we're trying to create be solving? Now, as a business owner, and some of you probably are, the first question that we usually ask is when you're entering into a business venture is, right, I'm trying to create something. What problem is this thing solving? Most of the times, it is the correct question to ask. But there are there are times or there are situations where that question is not the correct question to ask, and this is one of them. And the reason why this is one of them is because um, if you think about the purpose of a companion robot that we all hold, that kind of technology is probably not possible or is decades away. So in the current with the current state of technology that we have, in my view, the way that I look at it is there is no problem that at home that a human can't do that a robot can do better. Which means that robots are not that good, or not that are not good enough at all. In fact, they're quite bad, and so they would not serve the purposes that that a companion robot would is intended to solve. So I think is the wrong kind of question to ask. And all these companies that are trying to make Alexa on wheels is definitely not helping that cause. So this is where I figured there was an opportunity for Vāsthu and us to explore is there a way to think about an alternative way of creating a companion robot? This gives us the problem, but it we're looking for in order to get some direction, I would say that we just kill the robot entirely, right? Forget about the robot. Uh, in fact, the companion robot, the concept itself, let's split it into two things that are mutually exclusive. So you have on the one hand, you have the companion, and then on the other hand, you have the robot. However, there's a big challenge. The challenge is that if you ask anyone, you would get different images or different ideas of what a robot is, which is why I asked the instruction was for you to hold the image. And what you'll see here in front of on the slide is the popular some examples of the popular cultural conceptions of what a companion robot is, or something that can be thought of as a companion. Now, if you ask someone from the industry, you get a different image. You ask someone from the academia, you get a different one. And definitely, as you can see here, a popular conception is entirely different. But I or myself or Vāsthu doesn't really care about what the industry or academia thinks about. What I care about is what the popular culture thinks about. And the reason why that is important is because if you look at all the different startup companies, about more than 95% of them, they fail. And the reason why they fail is because they create products that nobody wants. But they're playing really towards trying to fulfill the expectation of what the popular culture expects in terms of what a companion could be. And we all know in the robotics community that it is not possible to achieve that for many decades. So we need a different way to think about how do we even approach that goal. So one way I'd like to suggest is when we do split the concept of being a companion versus a robot, what we end up is with a mutually exclusive thing where to be a companion, you cannot be a robot, and if you are a robot, you cannot be a companion, and that's the way that I like to think. And by uh, in the title of the talk, when I said rethinking cognition, emotion, and form, that is exactly what I'm saying, is to move beyond the robot and start thinking about the companion. If we want to make companion robots, if we want to end the idea that, you know what, robots are not good, they're not intended, they cannot be companions, then we need to get away from robots. And the three pieces of the puzzle in order to achieve that uh, that goal is to reconsider the current conventional theories of what cognition is or how cognition works, what emotion is or how it is created, how it comes about, how the brain creates it, and form. Now, technically speaking, there are only two things. There's cognition and form, because emotion is really a process in cognition. Now, that might come to some as blasphemy, let's say, because the conventional idea says, well, we have cognition, which is completely different from emotion. But we'll get to that in just a bit. But we we have to start rethinking these three pieces of the puzzle before we even think about what a companion could be. So what we see on the left-hand side here is a graphic that I'd like to use to illustrate the current situation or the current approach when it comes to um, designing or designing a companion by the market or the startups that so far have been and still try to succeed in this area. The way that they look at it is they say, right, we're going to make a companion robot, and they create a list of features and functionalities that they intend that this companion to be able to do. And those features and functionalities are represented by these dots in a very circular fashion. There is some kind of a structure there in that they have this that there's a circle and there's the around, but that structure is just held together by the fact they want to make a companion robot. But the features themselves, they have no purpose other than for being there just for differentiation purposes from competition. It has no connection whatsoever to the underlying form either. So if, say, a quintessential example is the Alexa robot, the Alexa puck, right? The Alexa puck, it looks like a hockey puck, but when you look at the hockey puck, it has what the kinds of things that this thing can do has no connection whatsoever to the form, and that to me is an issue, and which is why um, which is why in my suggestion on the right hand side here, where you have all of the different um, features or functionalities or values that this form can provide is represented by these dots, but they're strongly connected using these solid lines, just to suggest that there ought to be a very strong connection between what the form is and what it can offer. And these things that it can offer, I call them possibilities. So we have, you might have heard this thing called the uncanny valley effect. Now, what the uncanny valley effect suggests in the gray curve over here is that the more similar the form becomes to a human-like appearance, at some point right here, um, at the peak, when it becomes so close to being human, but a little bit, we can sense that it is not human. That's when there's a crash in our perception of that form, and that's represented by this valley, which is why it's called the uncanny valley. And as we keep moving away from the human form, again, the perception goes back to normal and even exceeds sometimes. So while we were thinking about this particular curve, me and Kyle, we were thinking about, right, how can we understand the uncanny valley effect in the way that we are thinking about form and its relation to the companion, and why it is so important. And we figured to draw this curve represented by this orange line here, it doesn't have to be exactly that way, but the trend is upwards. What that suggests is the more complex you have a form, the potential for its inherent expressiveness increases, right? So the form, let's say you take a human example, is more expressive than, say, a slug, because of the difference in complexity in form. Um, but what the consequence of that is also that our expected expressiveness also becomes higher. And the implication of this formulation is, us humans, when we perceive some form that is more complex or just as complex as us, we expect it to be just as expressive or more expressive. And when that fails, we erect this mental wall that we can never overcome. And that's the uncanny valley effect right here. So that when we look at it that way, all of the companies that existed and have gone bankrupt and still and some new ones coming up, um, the lesson for them is to create is that you cannot create is that people do not want to interact with things that are more complex or just as complex as them. That's a lot of work. They want to interact with things that are seemingly less complex. So that brings me to the next part of these four principles I'm suggesting with respect to form. But just before that, I would like to say why I think form is so important and why do I think the current way of approaching it is so problematic is because in the conventional approach, the form is nothing but just a bag of features. It's just a container, a vessel of features and functionalities where emotion is just one of them and has no connection to form whatsoever, and has no connection to the idea of a companion at all. Um, to me, however, the reality, right, in our daily life, we encounter form everywhere. We interact with things that have a form, like a phone, like other people, other creatures. Everything has a form. Um, it is through our form that we can experience the world and also express ourselves. Um, so it in addition to that, it also provides it circumscribes our capabilities. The possibilities of a form are circumscribed by itself, right? Say for example, a human body, the form of that of the human body limits the kinds of things that it can do. Can it sense? Yes. What can it sense? What's possible? Um, so for that reason, I think form is um, non-negotiably important. And if we remove that aspect from the companion part, then we're creating something that does not match with the way that we experience the world. Another important aspect of the limitations prescribed or um, limitations put by the form is that we necessarily have to go through non-zero space, non-zero time, right? Things just don't happen in an instant for us. Uh, even though today we can speak to people, instant messaging and so on, we still have to take our phone, type something, and the message has to travel. It takes non-zero amount of time. We have to reach up to the phone, so we're going through space, we're going through time. So that aspect is neglected, is removed with the conventional way of doing it. So given that these are the problems, and this is how I like to think about form, it brings me to how can we go about, what are the concrete things that we can do in order to create something like that? The first thing I would say is the form that we intend to create or give to a companion, it has to be understandable. And when I say understandable, in the context of the different possibilities that this form can provide or achieve, it has to give to the user obvious cues. It has to contain obvious cues that when the user looks at it, they kind of get these mental cues as to, oh, what if I tried this? What if I tried that? What happens if I do this? And in that sense, when it is understandable in that way, it invites them. And when the form can invite the user to it also creates those opportunities for the user to explore, sorry, to discover those, aha, I didn't expect that, those surprising moments. The value that we get out of it is entirely dependent on the user itself, right? In the same way that when I interact with my phone or the different devices, or even in fact people in the because we're talking about companions, when we are interacting with, let's say, our pets or people, the value that we derive out of that interaction, out of that relationship, is entirely dependent on how we're feeling, how they're feeling, what's going on around us. So the key words are depends and context. And the form, when it's able to provide that kind of contextual value or set of values, that is what I call it to be flexible. So these are the four things constrained by the requirement for the form to conform to non-zero space and time is what I would consider the correct kind of form to give to a companion. And then we come to the second piece of the puzzle, which is emotion. So given that the one piece of the puzzle for creating a companion is the form, the second aspect is emotion. Because a large part of our interactions between human beings and things, humans and other creatures, is emotion. We connect to things emotionally. We connect to people emotionally. We connect to our pets and other animals emotionally. So emotion is such a crucial component when it comes to this companion relationship, right? In order for a companion relationship to come about, we have to invest time. We have to invest effort. It takes time. It evolves and develops over a period of time with the investment of emotion. Um, as a roboticist, when I'm thinking about companion, I also have to think about how do I, in fact, implement this? Like, what is the computational way of going about giving a piece of metal emotion? What does it even mean? The conventional way suggests that the brain has these different centers of emotion, where each center is specific to a particular emotion. So happiness has a center, sadness has a center, your the joy has a center, fear has a center, all these different centers. And what it says is when the brain receives some kind of an input, let's say you spoke something in a particular way or you did something and you watched it, so that input, it triggers or it triggers these circuits. And when a particular circuit that corresponds to a specific emotion gets activated, that's when we experience emotion. So it's almost automatic in that way. The problem, however, is that this theory is called the basic emotion theory. One of the claims of this theory is that all cultures, all humans across all cultures, they have a set of basic emotions, which happen to be the classical five: happiness, sadness, disgust, fear, and another one. So you have these five basic emotions that apparently all humans across all cultures have. They can experience and also express. And there are classified templates of how that would look like, and which is expressed here in these tiny graphics. The problem with the theory is it cannot explain the variation. So when upon testing the data and retesting the data or confirming or the strength of the explanatory power of this theory, it has been shown to be lacking. And so what has been observed instead is, instead of uniformity, there's extreme variation when it comes to how different people across different cultures experience and express emotions that we in the West we recognize things. So that variation is not explained very well by this theory. What is also not explained is how culture plays a role in this variation. How does culture facilitate this variation? Why does variation even come about when we share similar biology in the brain? So around 2016, around 20 mid 2018, I came across this book by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She's a neuroscientist at the Northeastern University in Canada. She author of How Emotions Are Made. I was reading her book, and that's when I realized that um, according to her theory of constructed emotion, she suggests that emotion is one thing. It's not a set of distinct, specific things, but instead it is a population of categories, different categories, and those categories are given to us by the culture. So the brain, in its process of cognition, it creates emotion as one of the different processes. And the specific instances that we recognize as happiness or sadness or any other emotion are really not emotion per se, but a specific category of emotion, which is given to us by our culture and our experience to recognize something using that label. There are three ingredients to emotion, how the brain creates them. The three specific ingredients. One is interoception, exteroception, and conceptualization. Interoception is about what's happening on the inside, the different sensations. Exteroception is about what's happening on the outside, all of the external sensation, the classical five senses. And conceptualization. Conceptualization is all of the different concepts that we hold in our head and that we create, that we learn through our culture, through experience, and through interaction. So these three ingredients, they are a recipe for creating emotion. And the way that they interact is that you have emotion, which is it is by categorization of the brain of what's happening on the inside. So it gives a label, which is different of in the context of what's happening on the outside, which is basically what emotion is. And so by looking at emotion in this particular way, what she suggests is our brain is flexible in that it not only works off of our internal feelings of, oh, I feel good, I feel bad, but also can create new labels by mixing these different concepts that we can learn through culture. So I'm originally from India. There's some things that I can recognize which are given to me by my culture, but I can also learn those emotion labels that are only recognized here in the West as being specific types of emotion categories. And the value of the emotion, that particular way of thinking, is because she proposes a mechanism that ties into the general way that cognition happens. Though she provides it in a more theoretical, psychological terms, she, however, points to a general mechanism underlying emotion. And in order for us to think or implement emotion, we need to really understand what is the computational mechanism, which brings us into the third piece of the puzzle, which is cognition. So Dr. Carl Friston of Imperial College London, he's been looking at at the problem of cognition since about 2003, with his seminal paper called "A Theory of Cortical Responses," in which he proposes that instead of the brain, the conventional way of thinking of the brain as a passive receiver of input, it processes it and then produces an output. Thinking of a brain as an active prediction machine, where it's continuously predicting what the input is going to be in the service of survival. The entire reason why the brain exists is to efficiently allocate energy resources for our survival. And in this process, the general mechanism that it uses is prediction. It predicts what's going to happen next, what input is going to be receiving. And in this process of cognition, emotion is a byproduct, which ties back into what Lisa Feldman Barrett she suggests as the mechanism through which emotion comes about. So these three ingredients put together, they provide us with the two ingredients, cognition and emotion. They provide us with the computational means of achieving what I think is a companion capable of being true to its name, a companion to to you, to us. And form plays that important role by giving it a medium to express itself. So one of the ways that we as Vāsthu have been exploring this particular set of ideas is by conceptualizing this black box, a project that we've been working for a couple of months. The idea is we take a dark room, we place a black cube in the center of this dark room so it blends with the surroundings. So when a person walks into this dark room, they see around them four walls with projections on them of floating particles just floating about. The floating particles represent what's happening in the black box brain. So that's the cognitive space of the cube. The moment that the cube senses the presence of the audience, it starts to move, which is represented by this graphic in the center, where you have these different pieces of the cube just moving about, just coming out and trying to invite the user, inviting them to explore and see what happens. The thing that we're looking at here with this project is, in order to achieve the kinds of behaviors that are interesting from a companion perspective, we need interaction. Is it possible for us to extract all of the information that we need with nothing but interaction? So all of the data that we get is from the user and the black box, the interaction between the two, the back and forth between the two. We don't need my hypothesis based on my study of Dr. Friston's work and Dr. Barrett's work is that we do not need all the kinds of data collection that we have going right now, or petabytes of data of all kinds and all sorts, to train these machine learning systems to learn about what emotion is or how emotion can be. In fact, I don't think it's going to be successful, but um, just through interaction and nothing but interaction. And while all of this is happening, the particles are creating connections between them. That's representative of the learning process. Those predictions made by the cube about what the user is going to do next and what it could do next, and what the interaction is going to give it in terms of value. What the product is also doing here is trying to give the cube itself a sense of agency along with the user. Um, so the particles themselves, as they're connecting, one of the side goals is that it would create some kind of a collective artwork demonstrating that interaction between the user and the cube. So that's a project I've been working for a couple of months. Which brings us into this idea of spaces. So we got from a robot to a companion. What's next? Can we imagine a companion that's not just something that sits on your desk or walks about in your home, but can the home itself be a companion? Can the entire space itself be a companion? And that direction was given to us by mentorship from Mark French of French Creative. He when he was at Puppet Place on Spike Island, um, myself and Carl, we used to him, and he would give us mentorship to figure out what our company is, what it represents, and so on. And it gave us this, true to our name, Vāsthu, which means an architectural space, the idea to expand, not just limited to a companion as something small, but something big, an entire space. So Vāsthu has also been working on another idea, which is what we call samsara, inspired by the Indian concept of eternal churn, the meaningless direction. You just keep going, things just keep going. Inspired by that and the Gaussian or the bell curve form, we've been working on another interactive sculpture that is on a similar principles as to the black box, however, on a much more smaller companion scale, one-to-one scale, whereas the black box is much more is more towards a group of people. So also, we've been providing research and development services to people like Javi. So that's our what Vāsthu has been doing since the pandemic, in addition to these different things. So if you'd like to know more about what Vāsthu is doing with black box or any of the other things, that you can contact me, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it.